we've got real problems. We've got gas prices that have been climbing every day straight for the last 10 days. We're now looking at roughly $5 a gallon all across the nation, much higher in some places, especially if you live out there in California. We've got inflation that's running rampant, promises that there's no way it's going to slow down, oil at 122 bucks a barrel, and yet the answer to all of this is to keep the status quo while there's a big preparation underway for a big giant primetime special that's designed to once again divide our nation. I mean, look, I think Americans have real problems and I think Americans want solutions. I think that the most important thing on our agenda should be fixing inflation, fixing our energy crisis, because we can't live like this. Not with gas prices and utility prices and food prices escalating to where they are. And you know what else? Businesses can't deal with this as well. It's going to cost them, it's going to slow the U.S. economy, and we can't afford that. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Trish Regan. This is the Trish Regan Show, and I'm taking it on the road, all over my house. You all have been so responsive to the sort of home studio thing not being in the actual studio. So it's fun for me this way. I get to try a few more locations out. Anyway, great to have you as always. A quick reminder, portions of today's program are brought to you by my friends at Legacy Precious Metals. There's never been a better time, really, to invest in precious metals. I'm a big believer in having gold in your portfolio or having a gold-backed IRA, especially with all this inflation. So do me a favor, go check out Legacy Precious Metals today. That's legacypminvestments.com. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in the program, but first, let's start with how misguided I think some folks' priorities are there on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. I mean, the number one thing right now, let's be honest, should be fixing inflation, fixing our economy. And unfortunately, I think that there's either a lack of will or just a pure lack of intelligence when it comes to these things. As I've said before, why weren't we more realistic going into this moment in history? I mean, our intelligence professionals had been communicating the challenges that we were seeing overseas. We knew that was coming. And so wouldn't you think we'd have some kind of backup plan? I mean, there'd be a huge, huge push to make sure that we were energy independent like we used to be. And instead we saw none of that. Now, I realize some people think, well, maybe this was deliberate. Maybe this is the way they really actually get us to transfer over to green energy. I don't actually think it's as simple as that, because let's not forget politics is at stake. And when energy prices are this high and food prices are this high, the American people do tend to blame whoever's in office. And so it's not smart of whoever's in office to not care about the everyday needs of everyday people. You've got to somehow deal with that first. Look, I think you can invest in green energy. Go for those tax credits. I think that that's important. I think that you need to actually try and foster that energy industry along. But let's not do it in a vacuum. Let's recognize what's actually happening out there and let's prepare ourselves accordingly. We failed to do that, and right now we're dealing with the consequences. So again, oil prices, let me give you today's read. I mean, gas prices have just been skyrocketing. The answer is not to blame the gas companies. They're making very, very, still thin margins on this. Yeah, we're looking at roughly 120 per barrel right now on crude oil as I record this. We've got a market that's down across the board because there's real fear now that the U.S. consumer is going to have to pull back. I mean, the money's got to come from somewhere. And while we had a lot of stimulus going on, that's not there anymore. And this is something that's happening all over the world. I explained yesterday how the World Bank just came out and said, look, this is a problem. We're going back to 1970s stagflation. What is stagflation? I'm going to get into that in a second. But we're going to deal with this potentially for some time. I mean, these problems don't just go away overnight. And so you could be looking at potentially a decade of lost growth. And this was something the World Bank communicated yesterday. They said that they were worried that many economies all over the world are going to slip into recession. We very well could be one of them. As I've pointed out, the good thing about that all is by the time you figure out that you're in recession, often you're out. I wouldn't be surprised between us if we're in a recession right now. Don't forget, last quarter was negative growth. There are predictions by the Atlanta Fed, which the Fed follows quite carefully, of 0.9% growth for this quarter, but that's really thin. That's very slim. We'll see whether or not we get it. Plus, you got to think about the revisions that always come out. All the revisions that come out months later, oftentimes you find out, hey, we were in recession. So it's possible we are there now. And we've got to find a path through this. Look, the danger, of course, in all this with stagflation is that you wind up with a job market that's weakened. Now, I would say the one bright spot in all of this has been our job market, right? I mean, incredibly low unemployment, but there's talk that maybe that could suffer. You look at the jobless claims that were released today, and we saw a tick up higher. 29,000 more jobless claims being filed. Those are unemployment claims in the latest week. And the overall moving average, like if you look at the, if we look at the 8-week moving average, what we actually see as well is that there's a slight tick higher. So, look, we got some room given how low unemployment has been. It's so hard, right, to hire people. That may start to change. I'd argue that's actually a good thing for our economy. And then if we can get more people back to work, they've got more money in their pockets. Businesses are able to have higher productivity. And so I'm not as worried about that as some people, but the concern, just so I explain it to you, is you could have an environment where you don't have enough job growth starts to slow, and yet inflation is still there, right? So that's part of the problem with stagflation, as we call it, where you have higher costs for everything and yet a very slow economy. And that's kind of what you call a mess. Look, it's hard. They need to try and get this just right. We call it Goldilocks, right? Not too hot, not too cold. But with all that tinkering, they typically, by they, I mean the Federal Reserve, they typically screw it up. One of the reasons we had a huge housing bubble was because of the Federal Reserve and because of lawmakers too, who were overly aggressive in terms of wanting to basically be able to lend to anyone, whether or not they even had a job. I mean, there was that no income, no asset loan stuff. Remember that? They called them Nina loans. That didn't turn out so well. So if we consider what's going on now, there was too much money in the system. That led to a run-up in everything and a total sort of lack of recognition that anything could ever go down. Well, now the chickens are coming home to roost, and we're recognizing that things can go down. You saw mortgage rates. They've been increasing, right, because the 10-year yield has been going up a little bit. Consequently, lowest level of new mortgage applications in 22 years that we saw this week. There's a lot of other evidence out there that housing prices may start to weaken. For example, the number of days a home is now on the market has increased. The number of price decreases that we're seeing, that's also increased. Some of this could actually be healthy, right? Because when you get a rip-roaring economy, if it's not actually supported by fundamentals, then having some kind of cooling off is appropriate. The question is this happening too fast? And can we actually really manage it? It's why I keep saying you got to have some protection in your portfolio. You've got to take a look at gold. Call my friends at Legacy Precious Metals, a wonderful group. They can really help you out. Their number is 1-866-589-0560. If you're watching this on video, by the way, like it. Please like it, subscribe to the channel, but make sure you check out that number. You can see it right there on your screen. I also always include their links in the show notes so you can get it there as well. 1-866-589-0560. You're welcome to say I recommended you call. They're good friends of mine, and I know they'll take very, very good care of you. But anyway, look, this is a problem. It's why I keep saying you want to have some protection, and the gold-backed IRA is one way to do it. The actual gold coins or, hey, gold bars is another way to do it. My parents were telling me the story of my next-door neighbor growing up who was an airline pilot and saved all his money really, really diligently. did wonderfully well. I mean, he really is kind of that example, right, of the millionaire next door, made good money, but not crazy money, was very smart about how he invested it. And they said he always had gold coins. And I'm like, you know what? It makes sense. I get it. You know, he was worried about inflation. And it's a real thing, obviously. 8.3%. I don't think it changes anytime soon. So check it out, legacypminvestments.com today. They get a free guide you can download. But I do think that we got a problem, and it's happening again all over the world. The ECB just came out, finally, Christine Lagarde, and said, we're going to raise rates. They're following in the footsteps of the Federal Reserve. Of course, they're negative rates right now, so they got a ways to go. They're going to raise by 25 basis points. We've been raising by 50 basis points. The other thing is they're not unwinding their balance sheet. We're looking to unwind our gigantic balance sheet at the Fed. And so that's a little bit of a difference. And so consequently, I think you're going to still see the euro suffering some weakness compared to the dollar, which, how is that relevant? Perhaps if you're doing a currency trade, right, and you're buying blue chip European companies, maybe you're able to get them at a little bit of a discount because the dollar is so much stronger than it historically, at least over the last however many years it's been. Quick story, I got married many years ago, 2001, so quite a few years ago in Italy. We celebrated our honeymoon over there, and I remember the euro, which was just coming out right at that time. The euro was trading at a 15% discount to the dollar. So it was great. Like everything was on sale. You know, you'd look at a price and it was 15% off. And well, those days were short-lived. As I look at the Wall Street Journal dollar index, you see that, well, today anyway, the dollar is trading higher, 95.85. Again, that's Wall Street Journal dollar index. But you know what's amazing? You think about the euro right now, and Europe's on sale because you're looking at basically $1.06 per euro. If you look at the euro over the last year, it's really been challenged. And even with Christine Lagarde coming out and saying, okay, we're prepared, we're going to raise interest rates at some point and get out of negative territory, it's not enough to convince the market that Europe is going to get out of its inflation trouble. I will point out Europe has less of an inflation issue than us right now, but I think the trajectory, of course, is more challenging given the dependence there on natural gas, which is significant, right? That was maybe one of the mistakes that Germany made way back when. Ronald Reagan warned against it back in the 1980s, being too dependent on another nation for your energy supply, which brings us full circle back to where we are here today and the reality that energy prices are in this upward trajectory mode, and we can't fill the void fast enough because we don't have the energy. We're not drilling here in the U.S. We don't have contingency plans. I know we're going to OPEC and trying to get them. They agreed to increase output by roughly 600,000 barrels a day. Most people don't believe that's going to do much, and I think the market, given where oil is trading, is also telling you it's not going to do much. So now you start to say, well, what do we have here at home? What do we have in our hemisphere? Again, you know, I hate to say it, but Venezuela is one of the options that in terms of real politic, we should be looking at because they got a heck of a lot of oil. Now, none of this, again, can just magically happen overnight. There needs to be thought and planning, both in terms of green energy and in terms of traditional energy, because I sure as heck don't want to see the U.S. in a really dependent style situation. And that's where we are. I mean, you know, energy prices are going up, and that causes the cost of everything else to go up. So this isn't good. I hope we can fix it. And I hope that some smart people are thinking about some new innovative policies to address this. A quick reminder, make sure that you subscribe to the show on Apple iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure that you tune back in here every single day. I'm here with you 5 days a week on the Trish Regan Show. You can subscribe to the channel on YouTube, on Rumble, of course, and on my Locals channel, where actually, if you're interested in investing, I put out some pretty regular notes on how to think about these markets. That's trishregan.locals.com, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.